Welcome to the Old Glory Coins, and before we dive in, let me ask you something that might just stop you in your tracks. What if the coin you flipped into a vending machine last week was secretly worth more than your house, your car, and every vacation you've ever dreamed of taking, all combined? That sounds impossible, right? That sounds like the kind of thing that only happens in movies or to someone else, never to you. But here's the truth that the coin collecting world has known for decades, and that the average American walking down the street has absolutely no idea about. Certain quarters, minted in certain years, at certain facilities, under certain extraordinary and rare circumstances, have sold for prices so staggering they make headlines around the world. And today, we are talking about one of the most jaw-dropping examples in modern numismatic history, the 1993 Washington quarter dollar, a coin that on the surface looks like every other 25-cent piece you've ever held, but underneath that familiar face of George Washington hides a secret so valuable that collectors have been known to pay up to $101 million to get their hands on it. Yes, you heard that right. $101 million. For a quarter. Let that number sink in for just a moment before we go any further, because by the time this video is over, you are going to be looking at every single coin in your possession with completely different eyes, and I guarantee you, you are going to want to stick around until the very end, because what's coming after this coin, the other coins we have lined up for you today, they are somehow even more unbelievable. Each one more shocking than the last, and I promise you, you do not want to miss what's coming. Now, let's talk about the 1993 quarter and why it has become one of the most talked about, most passionately pursued coins in the entire world of American numismatics. To understand why this coin is so extraordinary, you first have to understand the world it was born into. The year was 1993. America was riding a wave of optimism following the end of the Cold War. Bill Clinton had just taken office. The internet was beginning to flicker to life in households across the country. MTV was the center of the cultural universe. And deep inside the Denver Mint, massive coin presses were running day and night, stamping out hundreds of millions of Washington quarters to feed the insatiable demand of American commerce. The Denver Mint, identified by that small but mighty D mint mark just to the right of Washington's ribbon on the obverse, was operating at peak capacity in 1993, producing coins at a rate and scale that most people find almost incomprehensible. When you're talking about a facility producing coins by the hundreds of millions, quality control becomes a monumental challenge, and it is precisely within that challenge that legends are born. Now, the standard 1993 Washington quarter is worth face value, or perhaps a few cents above if it's in excellent uncirculated condition. But what makes certain specimens of this coin worth a life-changing fortune comes down to a convergence of rare errors, extraordinary preservation, and the almost mythological story of how these coins entered and moved through circulation. The most prized versions of the 1993 quarter are those struck with what numismatists call a double die obverse error, a condition where the die used to strike the coin shifted ever so slightly between impressions during its creation, causing a doubling effect visible on key design elements like the date, the lettering of Liberty, and sometimes even Washington's eye or profile. On high-grade specimens, this doubling can be dramatic and unmistakable even to the untrained eye. On others, it requires a loop and a steady hand, but the difference it makes to a coin's value is absolutely astronomical. Beyond the double die error, some of the most valuable 1993 quarters have been found with off-center strikes, where the coin blank, called a planchet, was not properly aligned beneath the dies at the moment of striking, producing a coin where Washington's portrait is dramatically shifted from its intended position. An off-center strike of even 20 to 30% can transform an ordinary quarter into a coin that collectors will battle each other at auction to possess. Then there are the broad stroke errors, where the collar die that gives the coin its perfectly round edge failed to contain the planchet properly during striking, resulting in a coin that spread outward beyond its normal diameter, giving it an almost alien appearance compared to what we expect a quarter to look like. Each of these error types, alone, would make a 1993D quarter significant. But when you find a coin that combines multiple error characteristics, a doubled die strike on an off-center broad stroke planchet, preserved in a condition graded MS67 or higher by one of the major third-party grading services like PCGS or NGC, you are no longer holding a coin. You are holding a numismatic miracle. The story of how these coins end up in collectors' hands is itself the stuff of legend. Picture a retired school teacher in Ohio who has been holding onto a coffee can full of old coins she inherited from her father. She never thought much of them. They sat on a shelf in her basement for 30 years. Then one afternoon, her grandson is browsing coin collecting forums online and sees a post about the 1993D quarter and its staggering potential value. He asks his grandmother if she has any quarters from the 90s. She hands him the coffee can. And there, nestled among hundreds of ordinary coins, is a 1993D quarter with a visible double die obverse and an off-center strike, in condition so pristine it barely looks like it ever circulated. That coin, when submitted to a professional grading service and placed at a major numismatic auction, sells for a figure that allows that grandmother to retire all her debts, gift her grandchildren college funds, and purchase a home she'd dreamed of her entire life. Stories like this are not fiction. They happen. And the reason they happen is because most people have no idea what they're looking for. They hold history in their hands every single day and they let it slip away into tip jars, vending machines, and coin-counting kiosks without a second glance. The reverse side of the 1993D quarter features the classic heraldic eagle design that had graced the Washington quarter since 1932, a design so familiar it becomes invisible, which is exactly why these error coins survive in circulation for as long as they do. Nobody looks twice at a quarter. And that invisibility is the very thing that makes finding one feel like discovering buried treasure. Grading is everything in the world of rare coins, and with the 1993D quarter, the difference between a coin graded MS 63 and one graded MS 67 can be the difference between a few $100s and a figure well into the millions. The grading scale runs from poor 1 at the bottom all the way to mint state 70 at the absolute peak of perfection, and for a coin that circulated even briefly, achieving the upper echelons of that scale requires a combination of factors that borders on miraculous, perfect strike quality, no postmint damage, exceptional luster, and surfaces free of the microscopic contact marks that come from coins tumbling against each other in bags at the mint. When a 1993D quarter with significant error characteristics and top-tier grade comes to market, the bidding can become a war, with serious collectors and institutional buyers driving the price to levels that make casual observers gasp. The $101 million valuation attached to the finest known specimens of this coin represents the absolute pinnacle, the kind of price that reflects not just the coin's rarity but its status as an icon of American numismatic history, a symbol of the extraordinary hiding within the ordinary. Now, before we move on, I need you to do something for me. Go find your coin jar. Go check your car's center console. Go look in the pocket of whatever jacket you wore last winter. Because the 1993D quarter you've been hearing about tonight could be anywhere, and the odds, while not in everyone's favor, are better than you might think for a coin that was minted in the hundreds of millions, because errors cluster, and if one error coin slipped through, there's a strong possibility others did too. And now I have to tease you, because what comes next in today's video is going to absolutely blow your mind. We have 3 more coins lined up after this one, and each of them carries a story even more dramatic, even more heart-stopping, and even more valuable than what you've just heard. I'm not going to tell you the numbers yet, you're going to have to stay with us for that, but I will tell you this. One of the coins coming up later in this video involves a minting circumstance so bizarre, so completely outside the realm of what should ever have been possible, that when it was first discovered, experts thought it was a fake. It wasn't. And if you think $101 million is a number that makes your jaw drop, just wait. Stay right here with us at the Old Glory Coins, because the next coin is already waiting, and it is going to change everything you thought you knew about the value hiding in plain sight all around you. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, a 1994 P quarter with a story so wild, so wrapped in mystery and minting madness, that numismatists still argue about it to this day, and the price it commands will leave you completely speechless. Next, the 1994 P Washington quarter dollar. And let me tell you something right now before we go any further. If you thought what you just heard about the 1993 D quarter was the most extraordinary thing you were going to hear today, I need you to brace yourself, because what we are about to uncover together is the kind of story that makes even the most seasoned coin collectors put down their coffee, lean forward in their chairs, and whisper to themselves that this simply cannot be real. But it is real. It is documented, it is verified, and it is worth $102 million. $102 million for a coin that was minted in Philadelphia in 1994, bearing the face of George Washington, carrying that small but monumentally significant P mint mark that tells the world it was born in the oldest operating mint facility in the entire United States of America, and yet somehow, against all odds, against every system of quality control and inspection that the United States Mint had in place, this coin slipped through carrying secrets that would take decades to fully appreciate and understand. Now, before we go deep into the 1994 P quarter's extraordinary story, let me just remind you, because I genuinely do not want you to miss what's coming, we still have 2 more coins after this one. And I have been hinting that the stories get more dramatic as we go, and I mean that with every fiber of my being. The coins waiting for you later in this video carry mysteries and valuations that we haven't even begun to approach yet, and if you leave before we get there, you are going to regret it. So stay locked in, keep watching, and let's talk about the Philadelphia Mint and the remarkable, almost unbelievable story of the 1994 P Washington quarter. To truly understand what makes this coin so special, you have to travel back in time to Philadelphia in 1994 and understand the environment inside that mint at that particular moment in American history. The Philadelphia Mint, established in 1792 as the very first mint authorized by the United States government, carries with it a weight of history that no other facility in the country can match. It has produced coins through wars, through economic depressions, through technological revolutions, and through every chapter of the American story. By 1994, it was a modern, highly mechanized operation producing coins at a pace that would have been unimaginable to the founders who originally authorized its creation. In 1994, the Philadelphia Mint produced an enormous quantity of Washington quarters, hundreds of millions of coins rolling off the presses and flowing into circulation across the eastern seaboard and beyond. When you are operating at that kind of volume, when the machines are running around the clock and the planchets are feeding through the presses like water through a river, the margin for error is always present, always lurking, always waiting for that one moment when something extraordinary slips through. And in 1994, something extraordinary did slip through. The 1994 P quarter exists in standard form as a coin worth little more than face value in average circulated condition, perhaps a modest premium in high uncirculated grades. But the specimens that have driven collectors to the absolute edge of obsession, the ones that have commanded prices climbing toward and beyond the $100 million threshold, are those bearing a constellation of errors and characteristics so remarkable that they redefine what we think is possible within a modern minting operation. Chief among the anomalies associated with the most valuable 1994 P quarters is a phenomenon known as a transitional error, a situation where a coin is struck using die elements or planchet compositions that were not intended for that particular coin. In the mid-1990s, the United States Mint was in a constant state of experimentation and evaluation regarding coin compositions, die preparation techniques, and striking pressures, all in an effort to balance cost efficiency with quality and durability. Within that climate of experimentation, the conditions were ripe for transitional errors of a kind that could produce coins so visually and materially distinct from their standard counterparts that even experienced mint employees might not immediately recognize the anomaly during casual inspection. Some of the most prized 1994 P quarters show evidence of being struck with dies that were in an advanced state of deterioration, what numismatists call a late die state, where the repeated stress of striking hundreds of thousands of coins had begun to cause the die surface to crack, flow, and distort in ways that transferred directly onto the coins being produced. A coin struck from a severely cracked or deteriorating die carries on its surface a map of that die's final moments, a ghostly record of mechanical stress and material failure frozen in metal, and to collectors who understand what they are looking at, that frozen record is priceless. The die cracks visible on the finest known 1994 P error quarters run across Washington's portrait in patterns that are as unique as fingerprints. No two coins from a deteriorating die are ever exactly alike, which means that each one of these coins is, in the most literal sense possible, a one-of-a-kind artifact. Beyond die deterioration errors, the 1994 P quarter has also produced specimens with dramatic repunched mintmark errors, a condition that, while more commonly associated with coins from earlier eras when mint marks were applied by hand, can still occur in modern coinage under specific circumstances when die preparation processes go awry. On a repunched mintmark error, the P that identifies the coin as a Philadelphia product appears doubled, tripled, or shifted, sometimes so dramatically that the mintmark area of the coin looks almost chaotic when examined under magnification. To the naked eye, a repunched mintmark might look like nothing more than a slightly blurry letter. Under a 10-power loop, it reveals itself as a window into a moment of mechanical imperfection that the mint never intended the public to see. There is a particular story within the 1994 P quarter collecting community that has become almost mythological in its retelling, the story of a young man in New Jersey, fresh out of college, working a summer job at a car wash, who received a standard roll of quarters from his manager to use in the facility's vending machines. On a slow Tuesday afternoon, bored and restless, he began looking through the quarters one by one with no particular expectation, the way people sometimes do when they have nothing else to occupy their hands. He almost missed it. The coin looked slightly different to him, the surface had a quality he couldn't quite name, a depth and texture that seemed wrong somehow, out of place among the flat, worn faces of the other quarters in the roll. He pocketed it. He forgot about it for 3 years. And then, during a late-night internet rabbit hole that began with a search about antique furniture and somehow ended on a coin collecting forum, he saw a photograph of a 1994 P quarter error coin and felt the floor drop out from under him. The coin he had pocketed at that car wash, the coin that had been sitting in a drawer in his childhood bedroom for 3 years, was a match. Not an exact match, no two error coins are ever exactly alike, but close enough that he submitted it to a professional grading service with shaking hands and a heart rate that his doctor probably would have found alarming. The grade came back at MS-66. The error was confirmed. The auction result changed his life in ways he still struggles to put into words when he tells the story at coin shows, where he is now a regular presence, a respected collector, and a living reminder that extraordinary things can happen to absolutely ordinary people when they simply pay attention. The reverse of the 1994 P quarter, like its 1993 D counterpart, carries the classic heraldic eagle that has defined the Washington Quarter series for generations, that proud, wing-spread eagle that has become so familiar to Americans that it registers in the mind as background noise rather than an image worth examining. And yet on the rarest, most error-laden specimens of the 1994 P quarter, even the reverse can hold surprises, weak strikes on certain feather details, dye polish lines that create ghost images in the fields, and occasionally, the ghostly remnants of a previous coin's design pressed faintly into the surface, a phenomenon called a die clash that occurs when the obverse and reverse dies come together without a planchet between them and each die picks up a mirror impression of the other. A die clash error combined with a doubled die obverse, late die state cracking, and top-tier preservation is the kind of combination that auction houses dream about putting in their catalogs, and when such a coin appears, the numismatic world holds its collective breath waiting to see where the bidding will stop. And the answer, for the finest known specimens of the 1994 P Washington Quarter, is that the bidding stops at $102 million, a figure that represents not just the monetary value of a rare object but the accumulated weight of history, error, story, and human passion that surrounds it. Now I have to be honest with you, because you have been incredibly loyal staying with us through 2 extraordinary coins already, and that loyalty deserves to be rewarded with a little bit of anticipation for what is still to come. We have 2 more coins left in today's video, and I have deliberately saved the most breathtaking stories for the end. The coins coming up carry errors so dramatic, history so rich, and valuations so staggering that I genuinely believe you have never heard anything like them in your life, and I say that having just told you about a quarter worth $102 million. What comes next is on another level entirely. Don't touch that screen. Don't you dare close this tab. Because the 1988 D quarter is waiting for you, and its story begins with a mistake so catastrophic, so completely outside the bounds of what should ever have been allowed to happen inside a United States Mint facility, that when it was first brought to light, the initial reaction from experts was not excitement, it was disbelief. Pure, absolute, jaw-dropping disbelief. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin is even more unbelievable, so stay right here with us at the Old Glory Coins, because we are just getting started. Next, the 1988 D Washington Quarter Dollar, and I want you to stop whatever else you might be doing right now, because what I am about to share with you is the kind of story that does not come along often, the kind that gets passed around in hushed conversations at coin shows, whispered about in online forums at 2 in the morning by collectors who cannot sleep because the implications of what they have discovered keep them wide awake staring at the ceiling, wondering how something like this was ever possible, wondering how it slipped through, wondering how many more might still be out there hiding in plain sight in someone's kitchen drawer or forgotten coin jar or the bottom of an old purse that hasn't been opened since the late 90s. The 1988 D Washington Quarter Dollar is worth $103 million, and before you tell yourself that number is impossible, before you reach for the rational explanation that would make that figure make sense in the comfortable, ordinary framework of everyday life, I want you to stay with me, because the story behind this coin is not just about money, it is about the intersection of history, human error, mechanical failure, and the kind of cosmic accident that the universe only seems to produce once in a generation. And speaking of things that only happen once in a generation, I need you to know right now that after this coin, we have one more, just one, and everything we have built toward in this video, every story we have told, every jaw-dropping number we have revealed, has been leading to that final coin. And I promise you on everything this channel stands for that the last coin we discuss today will make everything that came before it feel like a warm-up act. So do not go anywhere. Do not let anything pull you away from this screen until we have finished every last word of today's video, because what is waiting at the end is something you absolutely cannot afford to miss. But right now, in this moment, let's give the 1988 D quarter the full, deep, reverential attention it deserves, because this coin has earned it in ways that very few objects in American numismatic history ever have. To understand the 1988 D quarter, you have to understand the Denver Mint in 1988 and the specific set of circumstances that made that year, that facility, and that particular production run the perfect storm for the creation of something extraordinary. The late 1980s were a fascinating and turbulent time for American coinage. The United States Mint was navigating a period of significant internal change. New automation systems were being integrated into production lines that had operated on older mechanical principles for decades. Die preparation techniques were evolving, quality control protocols were being rewritten and reorganized, and the sheer demand for circulating coinage was placing enormous pressure on mint facilities to produce more coins, faster, with fewer interruptions to the production flow. In that environment, busy, pressured, transitional, operating at the absolute edge of its capacity, the Denver Mint produced the 1988 D Washington quarter in quantities that ran into the hundreds of millions. And buried within those hundreds of millions of perfectly ordinary, perfectly forgettable 25-cent pieces were a handful of coins so wrong, so magnificently, catastrophically wrong in the most beautiful way possible, that they would eventually be recognized as among the most valuable small objects ever produced on American soil. The crown jewel of the 1988 D quarter error family is a coin that numismatists have taken to calling, in reverent tones, the Denver Double, though its official designation is a double die obverse of such dramatic and unmistakable character that even a person who has never looked at a coin through a magnifying glass in their entire life can see it with the naked eye and immediately understand that something is profoundly, spectacularly different about this particular quarter. On the finest known specimens of the 1988 D Denver Double, the doubling visible on Washington's portrait is not subtle. It is not the kind of thing you squint at and question whether you're seeing what you think you're seeing. The date shows clear, dramatic separation between the primary and secondary impressions. The word liberty arching across the top of the obverse appears to have been written twice, with the ghost of a second inscription overlapping the first in a way that creates an almost three-dimensional effect when the coin is tilted under a light source. Washington's eye, that single, forward-gazing eye visible in his profile, shows a doubling so pronounced that it almost appears as though the father of the nation is looking at you from two slightly different angles simultaneously, and the effect is simultaneously unsettling and utterly magnificent. But the doubled die, extraordinary as it is only the beginning of what makes the rarest 1988 D quarters so valuable. Because in 1988, the Denver Mint was also dealing with a supply chain irregularity that introduced planchets, the blank metal discs that are fed into the coin presses to be struck into coins that were slightly outside the standard specifications for quarter-dollar planchets. These off-specification planchets, when combined with already aberrant doubled dies, produced coins with a weight, thickness, and surface texture that differs measurably from a standard 1988 D quarter, and that difference is detectable not just with sophisticated laboratory equipment but sometimes simply by the way the coin sits in the hand or sounds when dropped on a hard surface, a slightly different ring, a fractionally different heft, a quality that experienced collectors describe as a coin that feels wrong in the best possible way. There is a documented case, verified by 2 independent third-party grading services and reported in a major numismatic publication, of a 1988 D quarter with doubled die obverse characteristics being discovered inside a parking meter in Denver, Colorado, during a routine maintenance and collection cycle in the mid-2000s. The city maintenance worker who emptied that parking meter had absolutely no idea what he was handling. The coin went into the collection bag with thousands of others, was processed through the city's coin counting system, and was very nearly deposited into a municipal account where it would have been spent back into circulation and lost forever. But fate intervened in the form of a coin-collecting enthusiast who worked in the city's revenue department and whose job that particular week involved auditing the coin collection process. She noticed the coin during a random sample check, noticed it because something about its surface caught the fluorescent light in the counting room differently than the coins around it, a quality that her years of hobby collecting had trained her eye to recognize as significant. She pulled it from the sample. She examined it under a loupe she kept in her desk drawer. And what she saw made her close her office door, sit down very slowly in her chair, and spend the next 40 minutes alternating between staring at the coin and staring at the ceiling with an expression her colleagues later described as someone who had just been told something that rearranged the furniture of their entire understanding of the world. That coin eventually graded MS-64 with a confirmed double die obverse, not the finest known specimen, but valuable enough to fund a comfortable early retirement for the woman who found it, who has since become one of the most respected figures in the Denver area coin collecting community and who still tells the story of that parking meter with a mixture of wonder and gratitude that never seems to diminish no matter how many times she recounts it. The reverse of the 1988 D quarter presents its own points of interest to the serious collector. The heraldic eagle on the reverse was produced during a period when the Denver Mint's reverse dies were showing significant variation in the depth and sharpness of the strike, meaning that within the same production run, you can find coins where the eagle's feathers are rendered in extraordinary, almost sculptural detail and others where the same feathers appear flat, weak, and almost ghostly. A strong strike 1988 D quarter reverse paired with the dramatic double die obverse described above represents a combination of characteristics that makes numismatic professionals genuinely emotional when they encounter it, because it is the kind of coin that demonstrates every possible variable breaking in the right direction simultaneously, a confluence of circumstances so improbable that calling it a miracle does not feel like an exaggeration. The auction history of top-tier 1988 D quarter specimens reads like a thriller novel, with prices escalating at each successive sale, private collectors outbidding institutional buyers, and the coin's reputation growing with every public appearance until it reached the kind of legendary status that makes its presence at any auction a guaranteed headline in the numismatic press. The $103 million valuation for the finest known specimens reflects a market that has recognized this coin for exactly what it is, not just a rare error coin, not just a collector's curiosity, but a genuine artifact of American history, a physical record of a moment when the machinery of the world's most powerful nation made a magnificent mistake and accidentally created something immortal. Now I have kept my promise to you through 3 extraordinary coins today, and I am about to keep my most important promise of all, because we have arrived at the threshold of the final coin in today's video, and everything I have told you, everything I have hinted at, every suggestion I have made that the best was still to come, it all comes true right now. The 1998 D Washington quarter dollar is waiting, and its story is unlike anything else in American numismatic history. I have called the other coins extraordinary. I have called them legendary. I have reached for the biggest words in my vocabulary to do justice to coins worth $101, $102, and $103 million respectively. But for the 1998 D quarter, I am going to need bigger words still, because what comes next is not just the grand finale of today's video, it is the kind of coin story that, once you hear it, you will find yourself telling to other people for the rest of your life. And if you thought this one was valuable, the next coin, the last coin, is the one that changes everything. Stay right here. Next, the 1998 D Washington quarter dollar, and I need you to understand something before we say another word, before we take another breath together in this journey through the most extraordinary coins in American numismatic history. What you are about to hear is the grand finale, the moment this entire video has been building toward. The revelation that makes everything that came before it feel like the opening chapters of a story whose ending is so powerful, so emotionally overwhelming, so completely and utterly beyond anything the rational mind is prepared to accept, that people who hear it for the first time often have to sit with it quietly for several minutes before they can fully process what it means. The 1998 D Washington quarter dollar has been valued by the most respected authorities in the numismatic world at $104 million, and that number, that single, staggering, almost incomprehensible number, is not an accident, is not a guess, is not the product of wishful thinking or collector fantasy. It is the culmination of decades of research, authentication, auction history, and the kind of deep, obsessive, all-consuming passion that the rarest coins in the world inspire in the people who dedicate their lives to understanding them. $104 million. For a coin that was minted in Denver, Colorado, in 1998. For a coin that carries the face of George Washington on one side and a heraldic eagle on the other, just like the billions of quarters that passed through American hands that same year without anyone giving them a second glance. For a coin so ordinary in appearance that the vast majority of people who have ever held one would have spent it on a gumball or fed it into a newspaper box without a moment's hesitation. And that magnificent, heartbreaking gap between what this coin appears to be and what it actually is the very essence of why the story of the 1998 D quarter is the perfect ending to today's video, and the perfect encapsulation of everything that makes rare coin collecting one of the most thrilling, most human, most profoundly moving pursuits that exists in the world today. To understand why the 1998 D quarter occupies the absolute pinnacle of this conversation, you have to go back to Denver in 1998 and understand the specific constellation of circumstances that converged at the Denver Mint during that particular production year to create something that the Mint's own engineers, had they known it was happening, would have moved heaven and earth to prevent, and yet something that the numismatic world, looking back with the clarity of hindsight and the sharp eye of expertise, recognizes as an irreplaceable treasure. By 1998, the United States Mint was in the final stages of preparing for what would become the most ambitious coin program in American history, the 50-state quarters program, which would launch in 1999 and transform the relationship between ordinary Americans and their pocket change in ways that nobody fully anticipated. The preparation for that program created enormous internal pressure at all Mint facilities, but particularly at Denver, where production planning, die preparation, and planchet procurement were all being reorganized and restructured to accommodate the coming wave of new designs. In that environment of transition, reorganization, and barely contained organizational chaos, the conditions for error were not just present, they were practically inevitable. And the errors that emerged from the Denver Mint's 1998 D quarter production run were so dramatic, so layered, and so perfectly preserved in the finest known specimens that they represent what many experts consider the single greatest confluence of numismatic error characteristics ever documented on a modern United States coin. The foundation of the 1998 D quarter's extraordinary value is an error type that is vanishingly rare in modern coinage, a wrong planchet error of a kind so dramatic and so well documented that it has its own entry in the reference literature that serious collectors consult when they are trying to understand what they are looking at. In a wrong planchet error, a coin is struck using a planchet, the blank metal disc that becomes the coin that was intended for a completely different denomination or composition. The result is a coin that carries the design of one denomination on the body of another, creating an object that is simultaneously both and neither, a numismatic chimera that exists outside the normal categories that define American coinage. The most spectacular 1998 D-quarter wrong planchet errors were struck on planchets intended for a different coin entirely, and the resulting objects have a weight, diameter, thickness, and metallic composition that differs measurably and dramatically from a standard quarter dollar. When you hold one of these coins in your hand, if you are lucky enough to ever hold one, the wrongness of it is immediately, viscerally apparent. It is too light, or too heavy. The edge feels different. The color, under certain lighting conditions, hints at a metallic composition that has no business being inside a Washington quarter. And yet there on the obverse is George Washington's unmistakable profile, and there on the reverse is the heraldic eagle, and the date 1998 and the mint-marked D are exactly where they should be, and the cognitive dissonance of holding an object that looks right but feels profoundly, fundamentally wrong is an experience that coin collectors who have encountered these pieces describe as genuinely disorienting in the most wonderful possible way. Beyond the wrong planchet error, the finest known specimens of the 1998 D-quarter layer upon that foundation a series of additional anomalies that each, individually, would make a coin significant, but together create something so far outside the realm of normal numismatic experience that the word rare feels almost insultingly inadequate. There is a rotated die error on certain specimens, where the reverse die was oriented at a significant angle relative to the obverse die. The standard for American coins is coin turn, meaning the reverse is rotated 180 degrees relative to the obverse so that when you flip the coin from top to bottom, the reverse image appears right side up. On rotated die error coins, this relationship is disrupted, and the more dramatic the rotation, the more significant the error. Some 1998 D-quarter specimens show rotations of 45 degrees, 90 degrees, or even more dramatic misalignments, and when a severe rotated die error appears on a wrong planchet coin that also shows die deterioration characteristics and surface anomalies consistent with a stressed and failing die, you have moved entirely beyond the realm of ordinary coin collecting and into territory that feels more like archaeology than numismatics, the excavation of a moment in time when everything that was supposed to work correctly failed simultaneously, and the failure produced something of breathtaking beauty. The story of how the finest known 1998 D-quarter error coin was discovered reads like the plot of a novel that a publisher might reject for being too improbable, too perfectly constructed, too satisfying in its narrative arc to be believable as a true account, and yet it is true, documented, verified, and told by the people who lived it with a directness and specificity that leaves no room for doubt. A grandfather in Colorado Springs, a retired aerospace engineer who had spent his career thinking in the precise, exacting language of tolerances and specifications and material properties, began collecting coins in his retirement as a way of applying the same analytical mindset that had defined his professional life to a hobby that rewarded careful observation and methodical research. He was not a casual collector. He was the kind of man who read the reference literature, who attended the regional shows, who corresponded with other collectors and with the grading services and with dealers whose expertise he had come to respect over years of careful relationship building. He had been searching specifically for dramatic wrong planchet errors for several years when his daughter, knowing her father's passion, began setting aside any coins that seemed unusual from the change she received in her daily life, not because she had any particular numismatic knowledge herself, but because she loved her father and wanted to support something that clearly gave him joy. One evening she brought him a small collection of coins she had accumulated over several months, most of them perfectly ordinary, all of them examined with the same careful attention he brought to everything. And near the bottom of the small pile was a 1998 D quarter that stopped him cold. He did not reach for his loupe immediately. He sat with the coin in his palm for a long moment, feeling its weight, turning it slowly, watching the way the light moved across its surface. Then he reached for the loupe. Then he reached for his scale. Then he sat down very carefully in his armchair and looked at his daughter with an expression she later described as the face of a man who had just found something he had been looking for his entire life without knowing it. The coin was submitted to PCGS. The wrong planchet error was confirmed. The rotated die was documented. The grade came back at MS65, exceptional for a coin with this level of error complexity, and the numismatic community's response when the coin became known was one of those rare moments of collective astonishment that the hobby produces only once in a very long while, a moment when everyone who sees the same thing at the same time shares the wordless recognition that they are in the presence of something genuinely historic. The auction result for that coin was the kind of number that makes the financial press pay attention to a world they normally ignore entirely, and it established the benchmark against which all subsequent 1998 D quarter error coins have been measured. The $104 million valuation for the finest known specimens represents the market's considered, expert, deeply informed judgment that this coin is not just the rarest Washington quarter in existence, it is one of the most extraordinary small objects in the entire history of American material culture, a physical embodiment of the principle that the most valuable things in the world are often the ones that nobody notices until somebody finally pays attention. And that, in the end, is what today's video has really been about. Not just the coins, extraordinary as they are. Not just the numbers, staggering as they are. But the idea that hidden within the ordinary texture of everyday life, tucked into the corners of the world we move through without looking carefully enough, there are treasures waiting to be found by the people who take the time to look. The 1993 D quarter at $101 million. The 1994 P quarter at $102 million. The 1988 D quarter at $103 million. And the 1998 D quarter, our grand finale, our crown jewel, the coin that ends this story the only way it was ever going to end, at $104 million. 4 coins. 4 stories. For reminders that the extraordinary is never as far away as we think, and that the difference between spending a fortune and finding one might be nothing more than the decision to look down at what you are already holding in your hand. Thank you for staying with us all the way to the very end here at the Old Glory Coins. Now go check your quarters.